the bribe.
I will not.
Don't accept the bribe.
We shall not.
You, Wangare, Akinyi, Kipchumba, and Wafula. Muhabukiri bribe ta Maulin. Don't accept the bribe. This is your government.
Nelson, happy with those words, of course, looking into the continued remembrance that needs to happen today for people to get some kind of closure. That's what we're hearing, that you want to come out and commemorate the lives of those lost. 65 is the number that we're looking at on the 25th of June 2024 when that happened. Wakili Nelson Havi, thank you.
Actually,
for
they
being
also
with us.
bribed the victims, last week. Very bad. Thank you so much.
Asante sana. The conversations continue, and at this point, before we come into our next one, we're going to cross over and take another spot check. Clement Masombo is in Nyeri County with a look at what's happening there, and will give us a bit of an update as we do the rounds again. Good morning, Clement.
Well, very good morning to you. Indeed, as you can see from Nyeri County, we can report relative calm here so far. And I actually stated that Nyeri is about 25% operational, given that majority of businesses are closed. Just a few shops and eateries are open. We have taken a walk from uptown to where we are right now, downtown, and we have actually noted that most of the businesses are closed. And when you talk about maybe a few banking institutions that are just operating so far, and we have spoken to some of the people in charge of the institutions, they are saying that they are just in a wait and see situation to see if things will turn out ugly like they have always been, then they will definitely close businesses. And most of other major businesses around supermarkets, all supermarkets that operate here in Nyeri town have closed, given that they have always been targeted whenever there are demonstrations or protests here in Nyeri. We have previously witnessed cases of looting in some of major supermarkets here, including Shiene supermarket, which belongs to the Kieni Member of Parliament, Njoroge Wainaina. We have also witnessed previously Naivas supermarket being looted, and just the other day there was also an attempt to loot Keti's supermarket here in Nyeri, and as a precaution, those supermarkets have closed down. Actually, they are not operational today, just like many other businesses. And unlike other towns, when you walk to Nyeri, when you come to Nyeri, there are no barricades on the road. There are no roadblocks, police inspections, or anything of the sort. Vehicles are moving in freely. But unlike the statement that was issued by the Matatu Owners Association the previous day, giving an assurance that there will be no interruption on operation of public service vehicles. Here in Nyeri so far, we can report that very few matatus are operational. Where we are, this is the main stage. The Nyeri is the main stage that hosts vehicles that go long distances, long routes. That's Nairobi, Nakuru, and other major towns. And very few matatus are here operating. On a normal day, this place. On a normal day, we will be having heavy traffic here. But as you can see, there are a lot of empty slots. When I look at the stage where most of vehicles that ply in the Nairobi route depart from, only 2 vehicles are there, but then the vehicles are there, but there are no passengers. So from here, from Nyeri, the situation is relatively calm. But we have also seen that police are on high alert, making patrols along all the streets. Some of them guarding businesses here and waiting to see if the situation maybe will turn out to be the other to be ugly. And from other towns like Nanyuki and Karatina, it's also still calm. But then in most cases from this region, the towns experience a relative calmness in the morning. But when we get to afternoon is when the demonstrators start engaging the police in running battles. So we will be here and also keeping in touch with our colleagues in other towns to see how the situation is, and of course update our viewers on what is happening on the ground.
All right, thank you very much for that update. Clement Masombo is in Nyeri with looks like the same picture, whereby businesses slowly opening, if that. We're going to take another update and come back to Alan Ochanda, who is in Kitengela, who was going to move from Lolongo earlier, and to give us an update about that. We know that historically this has been a spot where, in terms of protests and demonstrations, has been had an eye on it in terms of a highlight. Alan, coming back to you, what's the situation like in Kitengela?
Well, Ndu, from Mlolongo, where in the early morning we've seen the blocking of the ever-busy Mombasa Highway at Mlolongo, where all PSV vehicles and privately owned vehicles were blocked from accessing the town, Nairobi CBD, from Mlolongo. And of course, very few vehicles, specifically those transporting essential commodities like the long-distance trailers, were allowed to pass through the Nairobi CBD. But now passengers who've actually are bound for far-flung areas like western counties like Kakamega and Busia have been inconvenienced, and of course from this point they are still being blocked from accessing the Nairobi CBD. All the long-distance vehicles have actually been blocked at that point. But here in Kitengela, remember that Kitengela has actually been witnessing high-voltage demonstrations whenever such occasions arise. And so, but today, as at this hour, we are seeing a camp here, police officers stationed in various points here. And you can see that security has actually been heightened. Remember that Kitengela, everybody who uses the Mombasa, who comes from Kitengela and maybe wants to access the Nairobi CBD must pass through Mombasa Road, and so they've actually been blocked from at Mlolongo. And so businesses have temporarily been closed here. You can see the boda operators here are just parking at the ever busy matatu and boda terminal here in Kitengela. And so maybe if my colleague could just move closer here, you can see they're still parking here. Businesses are closed here because remember that in the past demonstrations and nationwide protests, we've seen instances where protesters, the criminal elements have actually infiltrated the demonstrations and carried out looting, and so business operators, out of abundance of caution, really closing down their businesses here. But let's just talk to some of the boda operators here. Peter Tundugu, Ndugu, tuko live KTN. Utueleze jina lako na nyinyi wahudumu wa bodaboda. Tunaona kwa leo hali hapa imetulia sana. Pengine nyinyi kama wahudumu wa bodaboda, hali iko vipi hapa Kitengela?
Hali
sasa na jina?
Kwa majina naitwa Paul Mutuku. Yes, nafanya bodaboda Kitengela. Hali ya leo sisi tulikuwa tunatarajia kufanya kazi sababu tuliambiwa pengine maandamano yamesitishwa, lakini kufika hapa tukapata kuna maaskari, watu hawatembei, watu wa kubeba pia unapata hawako. Sasa sisi tuko hapa tukingojea tuone kama pengine mambo yatakuwa sawa, biashara zifunguliwe tuanze kubeba, sababu kazi yetu lazima tuone biashara zinaendelea. Ndio unatoa mtu hapa unampeleka pale, toa mwingine kwa kazi hii unampeleka pale hivyo. So kazi yetu saa hii ni kama imesimama. Yes, hatuna.
Unasema imesimama ni kwa sababu watu hawapo ama ni nini kinaendelea, kwa sababu ipi ifanye kazi isiwepo?
Nasema hawapo sababu saa hii wale watu wako hapa, hakuna mtu anaenda aidha kazi, hakuna mtu wa kupelekwa kwa biashara yake sababu biashara zimefungwa. Wale wanafanya kazi wengi, unapata watu ni kama wanaangalia vile hali iko, so hakuna mtu anaweza, yani wateja sahi wa kubeba hawako.
Asante sana. Naam, pengine tusongee mwenzako hapa. Naona unakataa kuzungumza na sisi, lakini pengine mwenzako hapo, tueleze jina lako, songea karibu tu, utueleze jina lako. Tunaona kwa kawaida wahudumu wa bodaboda wenzako huwa pengine wakati kama huu, masaa kama haya, huwa mnabeba watu, hampo kwenye stage hii, lakini kwa leo mmejazana hapa. Hali ni vipi hapa?
Kwa jina kwanza naitwa Simil Kana. Watu hawako kwa sababu tunajua leo vile walikuwa wamepanga maandamano, watu wanahofia usalama yao. So ndio maana ndio watu hali iko sawa, lakini watu hawako, kwa sababu walidhania maybe utakuwa na vurugu, mambo haitakuwa ikiendelea.
Na nyinyi kama wahudumu wa bodaboda, pengine tumeona baadhi ya barabara zimeweza kuweza kufungwa, watu wengine ama maafisa wa usalama wameweza kuwazuia baadhi ya wale ambao wanasafiri kuelekea jijini Nairobi. Nyinyi hapa mnapo pengine wasafirisha wale ambao ni wateja wenyu, hali imekuwa vipi? Wameweza kujitokeza?
Watu hawako kabisa. Watu wengi nadhani wako kwa nyumba, kwa sababu hakuna mtu leo, hata ukiangalia unaona watu hawako, ni kusafi, hakuna watu wamesafiri sana leo. Yeah.
Naam, asante sana. Well, Ndu, you can see, yes, you can see pockets of people, but businesses, majorly the supermarkets, the small shops, have remained under lock and key because of the fear of the unknown. Remember that in the past, we've seen protesters who come out in their hundreds to protest. But today, remember that the Genzis had said it's a commemoration of their colleagues who died in 2024. But that could not maybe erase the fears, the wounds that the business operators here underwent, that they suffered. And so to just ensure that they exercise caution and that protect their businesses, most of the businesses have remained under lock and key. They are closed. And remember that also security operators are actually stationed in almost all corners to ensure that maybe they could just deter any instances of protesters here. And remember that the protests have actually been infiltrated by criminal elements in the past. And so you could see the police vans here, Land Cruisers, are stationed there to ensure that they could deter any attempts by criminal elements to maybe just come out, and also not just criminal elements, but they actually just ensure that they suppress anything to do with the protests here in Kitengela that normally often turn violent here after the infiltration by criminal elements. And so Ndu, we shall be keeping it here in Kitengela to just bring our viewers to speed with the happenings here in Kitengela, Kajiado County. Ndu.
Alan Ochanda is in Kitengela. He's moved on there from Lolongo, where he was earlier, and the situation, if anything, is the same. We're coming back where we have a conversation then, still on the Gen Z commemoration that is happening today, but from a business and security aspect, to then be able to have insights as to what it then means to keep yourself secure in a situation where we were already told that the police would provide security. Byron Dera is a safety and security expert, joins us in the studio this morning. Byron, good morning.
Morning to you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
We should have also been here with Anthony Wambogo, who is the chair of the Kitengela Business Owners, but he's been unable to get past Kitengela. Those are the things that we are seeing this morning as a result of this. But from a safety and security point of view, Byron, what's needed today?
What's a very interesting question. I mean, if Wambugu hasn't gotten here, then it means we have a consequence of what's going on today in our hands. And that very much is the reaction of the state security machinery, which by and large, if not for what it seems and what it looks like, has not facilitated, rather it has impeded and suppressed what it ought to actually do and deliver. I mean, strictly speaking about Copan list here, what you've seen is the mobilization, if not the preemptive deployment of police in certain nodes, so you call them flashpoints, which in a sense, as it was spelled out, was meant to facilitate and provide security for those who are going about the vigil, as expected, flags and flowers, but which then has occasioned blockades, prevention of free flow of traffic and all businesses, so to speak.
And yet, the security agencies, they cite that they are being preventive. They are trying to mitigate any damages, loss of life, which we all agree there has to be peace. We need to preserve life and property. But there is also, on the other side, the public outcry that we ought to be protected, to protect ourselves or to protest against that which we feel is not proper. So how do you find the balance between keeping people safe and offering the necessary security measures that will ensure that there is no more loss of life, in particular in this case, because people are coming out to commemorate loss of life as a result of the collapse of security agencies?
Well, if you cycle back to what occasioned and why we are here, we are talking the commemoration of 224 to 25, Gen Z protests. And if you were to go back to 224, we're talking about the finance bill, which was at the epicenter of it all. and which I feel, from where I sit, was a valid concern. So the state's reaction, where the buck stops, the buck stops with the bigger person, right? Has the credible responsibility, even under the Constitution, to provide public safety and security. That is really right at the center of the police work, and by extension, the security machinery as it is as a whole. Now, if you are to then look at protests, which is also guaranteed in the Constitution 2010, if you talk about the revised one, which stipulates how it is supposed to be done. So peaceably, without having arms. So it really does provide for that kind of assembly, which is what the protesters did talk about. It's vigil, it's flowers and flags.
Yeah.
Now, you go to separate the two. If you're talking about destruction of property and killings, loss of lives, you go to actually draw a very thick line in the sand between a protester and a hooligan and or a goon with a crowbar in their hands. Now, how to separate those two becomes a very critical perspective in terms of the analysis of the provision of public security and all the reaction of the machinery as a whole. So the preemptive deployments have got to be seen from the perspective of we facilitate. The Constitution talks about informing the security operatives and saying we are going to peaceably assemble in such a place. So the facilitation should be, in terms of the presence, should be that which then facilitates and provides security for the protesters. It should isolate, therefore, the goons and the hooligans that drop into this equation to take advantage of the same to extend their ill motives of whatever nature. So the prevention of the same then has got to be looked at from how do we balance our presence, posture, and profile in a manner that then doesn't provoke and in a way then facilitates and does the deterrence function. Because provocation and deterrence look the same until then things happen at that node where the third force appears, where we are expecting goons and all these other hooligans to drop in the equation to extend their ill-motivated actions.
Yeah, Baron, if you look at protests that have happened in the country for a while now, if you go back to 2024,
yes,
you remember a time when the protesters were actually out there with their flags, water, even music. They were dancing in the middle of the streets, And I remember it was part and parcel of that party at night after hard work on the streets.
Party after party.
Party after party. And everything was peaceful until that point when we remember the protesters, goons started infiltrating these protests. At some point, I remember the businessmen in Nairobi as well were hiring goons with batons to protect their businesses. But I'm speaking like that in the sense that where the Constitution has guaranteed rights to protest, and the police having all the machinery they have in terms of intelligence they collect to be able to isolate, and also just their training to isolate who's a goon from a protester. Are we saying today that what we're seeing happening is because the police cannot guarantee protesters their security? And what does that say to the overall security of wananchi and their property and businesses?
Well, it's a deep question that speaks to capacity. It also speaks to the outcomes thereof. It will speak to some domains in terms of authenticity, and it will also speak to processes. I remember when I was on TV in 2017, against the backdrop of the grand homecoming,
yes,
and where there was a pushback all the way from the airport and all the way into the Uhuru Park. And we saw what a crowd can actually do. The numbers speak for themselves. Now, the application of the force continuum is very, very important. And when you're looking at the disposition, which speaks to the three main elements of profile picture, profile, presence, and posture, is very important. Maybe to speak to that same element right there in the 2024 to 25, when the army was, the army's presence was seen as well, alongside the police, and I think that was really within the CBD. And you had the police on one street and barely 20, 30 meters apart, the separation between those two major arteries within the CBD, you would see people, gravitating towards the army and possibly also hanging around them, climbing on their vehicles, the Humvees that we used patrolling the special forces as we were launching into Project Somalia. And then on the other side, you are seeing a different scenario playing out, where there were people agitated, people are, frustrated, people are really, a loggerhead, so to speak, but then a different picture playing out. So that's really me here trying to really buttress this conversation on how you can balance the three Ps. You know, what is your presence looking like, and with the discussions around legitimacy, the things that have happened in the past and brought people to a realization at this particular point in time that this is the way our behavior then is doctored around those expectations, and of course the way we've been treated, so observation and experiences. Now, if then you have to really look at then how people will react to even a hello from a police and maybe a hello from a different person, then you go to actually have a heavy injection of psychological elements, which is pretty much how people behave given those learned experiences. Now, can those experiences be renegotiated? Can they be remedied in terms of how they look like in the grand scheme of things? Yes, they can. So questions, and maybe to cycle back to 2017 when on TV, the discussion came out in the heels of a research finding that was brought forward by WISP in conjunction with IEP. So WISP was World Internal Security and Police Index, and the Institute of Economics and Peace. And our police force was really service, so to speak, 210 Constitution, did get a heavy indictment. And the domains that were discussed there were those four that are highlighted, which is their processes, capacity, legitimacy, and outcomes. And we were, among the polled 127 nations, we were third worst in the world. Now, I said on TV that that report could be taken a pinch of salt, yes, but if you have to look at our processes, outcomes, legitimacy, all these things, the domains that were reviewed, then we could sit down and say, well, why are we not having the legitimacy? Why are we having that treatment that we see on the other side of the street and what we see on this side? So it speaks to how the population has then now been doctored into a socialization where if they are being approached by the police, then there's a bit of mistrust in even what they spell. So when they say, we are here to actually facilitate safety for you to actually go and peaceably assemble, then people take that with a pinch of salt. If it's coming from a different quarter, then it generates a different kind of reaction. So those are things that have got to be midwifed, because the consumption of public security and safety, really the big bulk of it is the citizenry. Okay. And it is upon the citizenry's, legitimacy, that then will inspire all these other things that we really are aspiring towards in terms of how we look at our the architecture of security as a whole, and then obviously how we consume those services in a nutshell.
Bringing it to what we are looking at right now, the psyche of somebody who is in the street protesting doesn't fall on some of those things. At that moment, there's something that you're doing.
Absolutely.
And you're not thinking about what anybody else is doing. That there's an agenda that you have that you're trying to fulfill. Now, as has been intimated by a lot of people, that protesters are criminals. But from what I'm hearing you say, that it is easy to demarcate, it is easy to define both of them in the same space. Today is not a protest, it's a commemoration. And people want to then be able to go lay flowers, wreaths, and then do whatever they need to do after that, without the criminal or violent aspect. I would assume that security agencies then would then be able to tell the difference between those who are going to do this and criminal elements that might infiltrate this commemoration. Would they not be able to?
Ideally, they should. Easier said than done. I mean,
it seems as though it's a blanket application that's being given because the city's being locked off.
Yes, it's the easy way out. It's the easy way out. I mean, professionalism demands that you actually apply higher standards. I know the law of most actually does classify how that happens, and not many of us are excellent. The law of most speaks to most being just a shallow reflection of that word most, where most are average, and average of us are mediocre. Now, if you were to apply yourself to the strictest standards of professionalism, then it ideally then means that you are able to exercise proper judgment. And as I said, the buck stops with the guy who has the biggest responsibility. The people that go on their own lives, as is said today, there are people who are on their phones and commemorating. There are people who at home, perhaps in hostels, maimed, suffered direct assaults, and are doing other things. Now, that is still commemoration, but there are people who are out in the streets and with flags and flowers and wanted to reach a certain spot that perhaps now has been cut off. Now, closure is a very important thing because it satisfies your mental makeups. If you look at the frustration aggression hypothesis, if that is prevented, then adaptations will come into the equation. And the adaptations are retreatism, there's rebellion, and of course there's ritualism.
So you're saying, quite simply,
yes,
if you're trying to get into the city with a flower and a flag, and somebody stops you from doing that, having realized that this is a constitutional right,
yes,
that the next step that you take might then be seen as violent and or criminal.
Absolutely. I mean, from this same kind of risk competition, if you're looking at that aspect, then if you are prevented from getting to a need, then there's a certain certainty of reaction. And the reactions is what are pretty much spelled out. So perhaps people are going to get more depressed. You know, people are going to think, and it's normal for human beings to react that way and to saying, okay, I haven't gotten to a point where I needed to go to, and there's a legitimate concern that I had to actually want to get there. So rebellion can get into the equation. And so you don't want to deal with a bigger problem than what you have in your hands. Perhaps in terms of de-escalation, what could have seemed a lot easier and better to do is to allow for this to peaceably happen whilst providing the necessary safeguards to prevent other people from hijacking the process.
So people should be let into the city? The blocks that we are seeing, security apparatus in different areas, should those be let down according to what you're saying?
Well, there's things that you can do, there's things that you cannot do. The things that you can do is actually to beef up. I mean, we've had enough in terms of budgetary allocations to employ more, if more is the aspect to consider. But I would sure think that amongst the considerations would be to retool in terms of mindset training. So that mindset shift is a big thing. Before you even go into the mission and methodologies, then you're thinking mindset is really where you need to have fundamental changes, which is the software. Now, doing the same thing over and over again, if you have to actually just walk back to 224, we had casualties, 225 casualties. Today, perhaps a good Lord is possibly going to jump the equation and prevent losses. But then the same things still happen. Our approaches, our reactions, and of course then how we look at the post. The post will look like people have gone home, they're okay, but it's not, because people, we are social beings, one, and two, we are rational beings, and people will rationalize this, that then if we had legitimate concerns to actually go lay a flag, coming back with it, it's drying in my own house, it needed to be somewhere else, then definitely people will think through this thing. And they are not isolated. They are going to be conversing on the digital space, because that is another battleground as well. It's well beyond the physical and the reactions with the state. The third perspective is really where the digital and information battleground is, which of course is a very level ground. The wars that are happening in the streets right about now are shifting to the digital space, where loads and loads, if you're thinking numbers alone, maybe the state doesn't have as many in terms of bloggers and whoever they are, as opposed to the general citizenry with phones and other gadgets in their hands.
Which is true, because even the mobilization of the June 24th was highly online, you know, and it was highly successful. So that's also something to consider in terms of security and safety.
True.
But also we don't want to have that be converted into the gagging of the media spaces.
That's right.
You know, both online and otherwise, mainstream and otherwise. So there is also concern there. But I wanted to bring in another dynamic that just recently, is it 2 years or so, Kenya was an expert in exporting security forces to Haiti to go and try and combat, you know, whatever was happening with the Haitian. But back home today, we are not able to defend our constitution. The security personnel, I mean, from the top, because we have very decent policemen who they go to huge extent to try and even protect people they should not be protecting, or to even try and make sure that peace prevails. But you realize that the orders that are being given to them today, the heavy deployment of police, one would argue was uncalled for. But our security agencies are not able to protect our constitution. And yet the constitution is what is supreme. It is what even employs them. So when you compare that call for us to export peace expertise to another country, and today we are not able to hold front for our own peace, where do you draw the line between competence, incompetence, and disregard for our rule of law?
Well, the easy answer is that charity begins at home. And charity beginning at home means that, I mean, we are riding on some very good momentum. I sure would say that Kenya has been such a perfect hub, you know, the island of peace, and we have such good strength to actually boast about in terms of the way we are set up, from the wholesome sort of the security infrastructure talk, police talk, the army. I mean, it's something to actually shake a stick at if you're looking at how we stand even with our neighbors, because considerations of how your home is set up could be, to an extent, reviewed, analyzed around how you stand with the guy next to you, in your front, on both sides of the shoulders, and behind you. So speaking about our regional composition in terms of those power dynamics and what Kenya is looked at from the global perspective and how it plays in the geopolitical landscape, we have had a good standing. Save for the blight that we had, 2007, 2008, post-election violence, and the continued strife and the mismanagement of our affairs with regards to just the way we treat security. Now, from that perspective, you can have someone choose you and say, oh, can you sort another problem elsewhere? So that was us, and it gives such a good standing. But then we have problems within our house. So the false sense of self gets in, that if we do not look at each other in the eye and say, well, we are not as good as the other public see us. You walk out of your home and you're looking sharp and you're dressing well and you're smelling good, but then well within your house there's disorder. Now that is exactly what has got to be looked at with a heavy load of internal, dissent from within, and that says we got a lot to fix.
Mario Adera, thank you for joining us this morning to then at least look at some of the security issues around this. It remains commemoration of the Genzi protest 2024. And as we've had conversations, it's going to be an interesting day to then be able to look through it. We've been able to update on that. Thank you for keeping the Situation Room here on KTN, and to all our audience here and also on Spice FM. We'll talk again tomorrow, God willing. Dennis Aseto Nduko, Joe Kamanya, and Brian Adera, I thank you for joining us in this today. More updates as we get them through the day. Stay with KTN and enjoy your viewing. Good morning.
About 370 kilometers from Kenya's capital.
Different towns.
Tunashika doria na kupiga mbizi kutoka kaunti 001.
Wameendeleza hamasa katika maeneo mbalimbali.
Different voices.
Kutoka kaunti za Kakamega, Vihiga, Bungoma.
Mvutano wa uongozi wa the Nairobi Hospital ukiendelea kushika kasi.
One story.
After a whole day of deliberations, all eyes are now on the government.
Resign and surrender to the police.
It's no longer a matter of if but when they will unveil their presidential ticket.
It has been a week characterized by vulgarities from the political class.
Wherever you are, we are 24/7 with news that make your day count.
Kutoka Voi, mimi ni Hezron Kimari.
Kutoka kaunti ya Nakuru, mimi ni Ken.
I'm Bramwell Bwire, reporting live from Kisumu CBD.
Reporting for KTN in Nyeri County. My name is Clement Masombo.
Tobias Chanji, KTN, Mombasa County.
And Musungu, KTN, Nairobi.
Elvis Kosgei, KTN, Uasin Gishu County.
This is KTN.
easy to spread, and non-sticky like no other. Sour petroleum jelly repairs dry skin and moisturizes like no other. Great quality product from Pwani Oil.
I was a ghost, I was alone.
This is the second ever dance for track I ever did.
I also want to do collabs with Kenyan artists.
Lakini kwa sasa hivi wanatoka soko bado niko. Bado uko Nasema hakuna noise pollution.
Hakuna noise pollution kabisa.
Nipe ngoma ya.
So from Machakos show iko fit mbaya tena sana.
Don't go nowhere. KTN Entertainment bora nipe kelele moja. Asema go. Once you go home, so home to your father, go home to your father, your father.